Good afternoon, I'm 14 First Alert meteorologist Arden Gregory, and today, as you know, is a First Alert weather day. We've already had one round of storms that did produce lots of lightning, heavy rain, and some hail earlier today. Now we're kind of getting a bit of a break. We're still on alert for another round of storms later tonight, though, and I think that will pose a greater damaging wind and tornado threat. Let's start with a look at our current watches. We have a severe thunderstorm watch that's still in effect until 6 o'clock. I'm kind of surprised that they haven't let that go because the storms that initially triggered that were those hailstorms that moved through earlier today that have now moved out. They've also issued a tornado watch off to our west. That does include Wayne, Edwards, and White counties in Illinois. That watch goes until 9 o'clock. As that line of storms starts to approach our region and that severe thunderstorm watch expires, I do think that we will probably see that tornado watch expanded to include the rest of the tri-state as we are anticipating that threat for damaging wind and tornadoes as we go through the night tonight. Moving forward to the timing now, let's take a closer look at what all is happening across the tri-state right now. We did, as I mentioned, have those storms that pushed through earlier today. They did produce some hail as well as lots of lightning and some heavy rain. They were kind of scattered though. Not all of you saw those storms. They have since pushed off to the east, and now we are getting a bit of a break from the rain across much of the tri-state. If I widen out the view though, you can kind of see what's headed our way next. We've got this cold front off to the northwest, and you can see that line of storms that comes down from the Great Lakes into Indiana and then starts to curve off to the west here, and you can kind of follow that line of storms, including some warnings just north of the tri-state in Clay County, Illinois, and then farther west into St. Louis. And then notice it gets a bit more broken, but there are still more thunderstorms all the way out into Missouri and into Kansas here. We expect the tail end of that line of storms to really start to develop more as we go through this afternoon. And then as this whole thing slides to the southeast, these storms back here that are really just now starting to develop, that's what's going to hit the tri-state a little bit later tonight. So those areas off to our west are also at a greater risk of seeing severe storms because those storms are going to be moving through there while there's still daylight, lots of energy from the sun, warmer temperatures, and just overall an environment more conducive to severe storm activity there. They may weaken some as they move into the tri-state, but still we're at a level 3 risk across our region for the threat of numerous severe storms later today. So we may still hit an isolated shower or storm as we go through this afternoon and evening, but many of us are getting a break from the rain from now until probably closer to 7 or 8 o'clock tonight is when that line of storms will come through. So any rain we get this afternoon will be these more isolated showers and storms that may or may not pop up. Very uncertain in that right now, as we did get worked over a little bit with those storms earlier this morning. That can kind of help us or hurt us in our storm chances later today. On the one hand, we need more moisture, and those storms that rolled through this morning dumped a bunch of rain, and as that evaporates, things get kind of humid, right? We introduce more moisture into the atmosphere. But sometimes those storms also use up some of our energy. So if we get some sunshine this afternoon, then that will sort of help replace that energy and really prime us for that threat of severe weather this evening. If we don't get any sunshine this afternoon, if it doesn't warm up some, then we may see those storms really start to weaken as they move into the tri-state. So on the one hand, it's feeding us moisture, but at the other side, it may have taken some of our energy. So it may end up being a wash. We'll just see. But the point is, any rain we get this afternoon will be very isolated. That line of thunderstorms along that cold front will start to push into the tri-state a little bit later this evening, most likely after 8 p.m. And those storms will be moving from the northwest to the southeast across the tri-state later tonight. It really looks like as we get closer to 9, 10, 11 o'clock tonight, that's when much of the tri-state will really be sort of under the gun with that line of storms moving through, and then those storms start to push off to the southeast and will probably be out of here by about 1 a.m., maybe 2. So sometime after midnight, These storms will then clear the tri-state. So we're not going to be tracking storms all night long, but it will be late into the night before these storms move out of here. So mainly from about 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. seems to be the most likely window of storms, but we may see some isolated storms between now and 8 p.m. before that main line gets here as well, although the chances of that seem isolated. We're then pretty dry as we get into Tuesday. Much of the day on Tuesday will be dry. We do have one more chance of some rain and thunderstorms starting late Tuesday afternoon, mainly after 4 or 5 p.m. We again see this chance of some scattered showers and thunderstorms through Tuesday afternoon and evening, and some of that rain will linger then into the overnight hours Tuesday night before this whole thing clears the tri-state as we get into Wednesday. So there is a threat of storms again tomorrow, but it's a much more isolated risk. I'll show you what I mean by that. Right now, again, the tri-state sitting at a level 3 risk. That's the case for almost our entire region. As you get farther east, we start to drop off into that level 2 threat. As you head farther west, you get into that level 4 threat, but we are pretty solidly in that level 3 risk, which means numerous severe storms are still possible today. Again, that level 4 risk for more widespread severe weather is off to our west, largely because that's where these storms are going to develop in the heat of the afternoon when everything is really primed and energized. By the time those storms get to us, the sun will be setting and we'll start to lose some of the energy of the day, and so they may start to weaken as they head our way, but could still be very potent, severe thunderstorms as they move into the tri-state. Moving forward to Tuesday, most of the storms are going to be to our south on Tuesday, but the tri-state is right at the cusp here of this level 1 risk where we could still get an isolated strong to severe storm on Tuesday, but again, we'll be right on the northern edge of that. So most of the storms will be to our south on Tuesday, but again, tomorrow there's still, as we get later into the afternoon and evening, this isolated threat that we could still see a little more storms or maybe even severe weather tomorrow too. As for our individual risks, let's break this down. We do have a level 2 risk of flooding, even though it has been very dry recently and we are in a drought. Sometimes the rain can fall so hard that you still end up with flooding. So it won't be any long-term flooding. The rivers are low, the creeks and ditches are empty. There's plenty of space for this water to go. But if it is raining really, really hard, it can rain faster than it can run off into those storm drains. So especially in urban areas that may not drain very well, you could end up with just some very brief flooding as the storms are rolling through. And then as it runs off into the ditches, that flooding should go away. So flooding, really only a very temporary threat as the storms are rolling through, not a long-term concern and not a major concern. If we're ranking them, flooding is low on the list here as far as my priorities go. As for hail, we are sitting at a level 2 risk for hail as well, but those hatch marks mean that it could be large hail, up to 2 inches or more. Now, hail was the primary concern with the storms we saw earlier today. So I really do think the hail threat is mainly if we get any of those individual storms that pop up this afternoon. The line of storms later tonight, I think, will be mainly focused on a wind and tornado threat. Now, when we're talking about the wind threat, notice that bright red color showing up there. That's a level 4, a 45% risk of seeing damaging winds. So as that line is rolling through, that's the most widespread concern, is that several areas all across the tri-state could all be dealing with damaging winds as this line of storms moves through. As that line moves through, you sometimes get these little kinks in the line. There is the concern that out to our west, these will start as supercells, so individual storms that then as they move forward kind of merge together into a line. So when they line up, you're talking more about damaging wind, but because they would have started out as these supercells, the line will probably be kind of bumpy, have lots of notches in it, and that, where you have those notches in the line, that's where you get these embedded tornadoes, and that's another major concern for tonight. Notice the tornado threat here at a level 2 to level 3. Much of the tri-state, especially as you head farther west, into that 10% risk of tornadoes. As you get out into Wayne County, it even butts up against that 15% risk. But the lines running through this indicate not just tornadoes, but a risk of significant tornadoes. So we could be looking at fairly large tornadoes where you're talking about a strong EF1, EF2, or even EF3 tornado possible. Again, if things come together just the right way. This is not a guarantee that these tornadoes are going to happen, but the ingredients are there, and depending on how things progress over the next few hours, there is that potential that we could see that kind of severe weather later tonight. For tomorrow, the risks are much more isolated. There is still just that 2% risk that we could maybe get an isolated tornado, but the chances of tornadoes with these storms tomorrow are pretty slim, and we're at a level 1 risk for flooding, wind, and hail. So again, most of these are probably just going to be general run-of-the-mill storms tomorrow evening, but there is that chance we could get an isolated severe storm that could produce heavy rain, damaging winds, hail, or even a brief tornado. But overall, our severe weather threat tomorrow is much lower than what we're looking at as we go through the rest of the day today and into the night tonight. All right, let's check in on the comments here. Good afternoon, Jeanette, Stacy, Heather, Suzanne, Greg, Jeff saying his garden really enjoyed the rain. Yeah, for those of you who got those storms earlier today, some of you did get hail, but it also put down a ½ inch to even an 1.5 inches of rain very quickly. And so for many of you, I mean, that's more rain than you've had this entire month so far. And that is rain we really needed as we are currently in a drought. Gino says they got rain and hail. Mary. Okay, so James is commenting on the chance that the next round of storms could weaken. Compared to what they will start out as off to our west, I do think the storms tonight will be weakening as they move into the tri-state. Will they completely fall apart and we get no severe weather whatsoever? The chances of that at this point are seeming pretty slim, but we did have those storms this morning. That may have sapped some of our energy. So again, it comes down to, can we get some sunshine? Can we warm things up enough this afternoon to kind of overcome the fact that we have already had storms today? So we'll just have to wait and see. All right, good afternoon, Greg, Tara. Aaliyah says it's pretty sunny on the east side of Evansville. So again, if that sun pops out and we warm things up, that's where we see that severe weather risk for later today increasing. Mary Beth got 1 inch of rain at noon today. Brayton, Jared, Jeff, William also said they got a little less than 1 inch, closer to 3/4 of an inch over by Bossy Field, and the streets did flood as that rain was coming down. So again, that's where that flooding comes into play. Just for a moment, when it is just pouring rain, you could get some flooding out there today. Sharon says the sun's coming out in Bremen. Tammy in Henderson. Skylar asking about timing again. Asking around 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock today will probably be mostly dry. Again, we might see an isolated storm popping up, but that line of storms, that widespread threat, that's not until later tonight, mainly after 8 p.m. Roxana said they didn't get any hail there, but I know other parts of Du Bois County did. Cheyenne saying it's sunny in Waverly. Is this a bad sign? We don't want sunshine today. Sunshine this afternoon only increases our chances for storms later this evening. So yeah, it's not good news. And yes, Shelley, still looking at a timeline after 8 p.m. tonight. 8 p.m. to about 1 a.m. or so seems the most likely window. And Chris says it's cloudy and cool in Mount Carmel. So again, that's a sign that the atmosphere has not recovered yet in Mount Carmel. So I'll be curious to see how this plays out as we get into this evening. If some parts of the tri-state have gotten some sunshine, warmed up a little bit, and others haven't, how those storms might progress as they move into the tri-state. And Evan's asking if there are tornadoes, where would they be most likely? Farther west, better chance of tornadoes. So for those of you in Illinois, your chances of seeing a tornado are greater than the rest of the tri-state. I would say as you get farther into western Kentucky, especially to the southeast, places like Ohio County, that would probably be the lowest risk of tornadoes tonight, but still a possibility there. And Beth says that they got some hail in Princeton. Yeah, there was lots of lightning. lots of lightning with those storms earlier today. I know that if you're watching 14 First Alert at noon earlier today, it got interesting. We took some direct hits. We had lightning strikes hit the station, knock out all of our computers, our cameras went down. It was a bit of a mess. We did our best to keep the show on the air there, but we've been struggling with technical glitches all afternoon after those storms hit us with lightning right around the lunch hour today. Checking in on our temperatures, this is really highlighting what I'm talking about when I'm mentioning we need some time to re-energize, especially if you got hit with those storms earlier today. One of the last places that rain moved out was up here in the northeast corner of the tri-state. Huntingburg is at just 66 degrees right now. Madisonville dodged a lot of the storms earlier today. It's been a little sunnier, a little drier. They're up to 82 right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how these storms progress as they move into the tri-state, because we do have some sunshine and some warmer temperatures in some places. Others, it's still cloudy and cool. So the question becomes, between now and 8 p.m., can we get to a point where the entire tri-state has really kind of bounced back and regained our energy after those storms this morning? Because if so, we could be in for some pretty serious weather later tonight. I want to point out the dew points well into the 60s now. Lack of moisture was kind of an inhibiting factor for these storms that we were tracking later for tonight. The concern was the air was so dry, would the thunderstorms basically start to dry out as they moved into the tri-state? We've seen that happen with the last few rounds of rain we've had, where they had storms out west, and then as they moved over us, they just kind of dried out because our air was so dry, it just sucked all the moisture out of the storms. Well, we got storms this morning. It rained. Things got a little muggy. We've got some moisture in the atmosphere now. So we have seen an increase in the humidity. Notice I mentioned earlier Madisonville dodged pretty much all the rain earlier today. It went up around Webster County and then passed to the northeast. Madisonville really stayed pretty dry. Madisonville is warmer, but it also has some of the lowest dew points in the tri-state. So where we're really going to kind of hit our best chance for severe weather is the areas where the rain has moved through. You've got these higher dew points, but then if the sun breaks out and we warm things up, that's where you're really primed for severe weather.
New PDS tornado watch for the whole tri-state.
Oh, okay.
Until 11 just came.
Okay, Jeff Lyons just jumped in here to let me know that we do have a new tornado watch for the entire tri-state until 11 o'clock tonight. So we were talking earlier about how we expected that tornado watch to be expanded. That has now happened. So we're no longer on the severe thunderstorm watch for the storms that moved through earlier today with the hail threat. We're now really pivoting our focus to those that line of storms that brings us the tornado threat as we get later into the day today. I do want to point out our winds are largely coming from the south. That's also helping to pull warmer, more humid air up into the tri-state. So we may yet recover from those storms this morning. And so if the atmosphere can get enough energy going today, we do still have that chance of severe storms, mainly from about midnight and earlier. So 8 p.m. to about 1 a.m. seems like our window for storms. The second half of the night, we should all be able to go to sleep just fine. But for the first half of the night, we are going to be tracking that damaging wind and tornado threat. Tomorrow then, dry for most of the day, but we do have that chance of storms coming into play Tuesday, late Tuesday afternoon into Tuesday evening, and that's where we have a more isolated threat, but still another threat that we could maybe get a few strong to severe thunderstorms, but it's not as widespread of a concern as what we're going to get out there this evening. Then once we get through tomorrow, it's really much quieter, mostly dry, pretty cool, highs in the 60s through the rest of the week, so we just got to get through tonight and tomorrow. All right, let me check in on the comments, try and answer any remaining questions before I move on. Yvonne mentioning there's sunshine in Wadesville and it's getting humid. Yeah, that's telling us that we're getting primed and ready for those thunderstorms. That energy, that warmth, that humidity, that's what feeds the thunderstorms. And so if it's cool and dry here, then when the thunderstorms get here, they basically go hungry and it will just kind of fall apart. But if they've got that warmth, that humidity to feed those thunderstorms, then they'll just keep on coming. So they're going to develop off to our west where they have more of that energy, more of that warm, humid air. But the question is, as they move into the tri-state, they may weaken some but how much? And that'll really depend on how much energy we have at the end of this afternoon. All right. Some people saying they lost power. Yeah, like I said, we lost power here around noon today. And again, we're now under a tornado watch. Jacob also commented around the same time Jeff walked in and let me know that. Yes, so everybody is now under a tornado watch for later tonight. And again, it looks like this will probably start close to 8 p.m. It may be a little sooner than that if things speed up, so definitely be paying attention to the weather through the rest of the day today. Have that First Alert app, have your notifications turned on so that you will get those alerts as they're issued, but it does seem like those storms will probably start to roll in close to 8 o'clock tonight, and then they're going to be with us up through midnight, maybe 1 a.m. is when they're going to start to move out of the tri-state. So late this evening through the first half of the night, we do have that threat of damaging winds, as well as tornadoes. Those are the main concerns with the storms later this evening. They may also be capable of producing some heavy downpours and some hail, but damaging wind and tornadoes are the main focus moving forward. The heavy rain and hail threat was mainly for the storms that have already moved out. So now we're pivoting to the next round where it is mainly going to be wind and tornado threat as we move forward with the rest of this evening and into tonight. All right, and like I said, there is still that chance we could get some isolated thunderstorms through this afternoon. So when I'm saying 8 p.m., I'm talking about that main line of storms. We could have some very hit or miss showers and storms prior to that. You may still get some rain, some thunder, maybe even some hail as we go through the rest of the day today. So again, it's important to stay weather aware. Those storms will be pretty isolated, pretty hit or miss. Not everyone's going to see rain this afternoon, but everybody's going to see rain later tonight as that line moves through along that cold front. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lyons will have another look at your forecast on 14 News tonight at 4, 5, 6, and his streaming show tonight at 9. 14 News at 10 is scheduled to only be streaming tonight because of NBA games on NBC, but it's very possible that we will be on the air anyway if we have tornado warnings. Obviously, we will be breaking in wall-to-wall, bringing you continuous coverage over those NBA games. So we'll just have to wait and see what the rest of the night has in store for us, but keep it tuned to 14 News. Have your First Alert weather app and with those notifications turned on, and we're all going to get through tonight just fine. You just want to make sure that you've got a plan in place, know where to go, where your safe spot is. If you need to be somewhere else other than your home tonight, make those arrangements. If you live in a mobile home, you don't want to be at home tonight just praying that you don't get hit. Please go somewhere safe. There are a handful of shelters opening up in some churches and whatnot, so check for your local area. Stay with friends, stay with family, do what you need to do to stay safe out there. And again, everyone, make sure that you have a way to receive warnings and are paying attention to the weather tonight so that you're not caught off guard. All right, Jeff will have your next update on 14 News at 4. Stay safe and have a good rest of your day.